Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Thorne, and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast, the show where we talk about aviation and recently about interior design. Regular viewers of our YouTube channel will notice that 2 weeks ago we had a fantastic shelving unit, and then a week later it was gone. We speculated it could be the Dread Enoch, as Jake called him, but for some reason the Dread Enoch appears to have brought back the shelving unit. Jake, Jake Nelson, hello, welcome to the show, blah, 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 blah.
Hello, Adam.
Let's get to the important stuff for shelving unit.
Oh, look, it's a very tasteful design, Adam, that I think really accents the ferns on either side of it. Now, it's a very, very modern sort of design as well. It's not really a classic kind of bookshelf not an older one. It's a modern bookshelf for a modern podcast studio, I feel, and refreshingly ooze free from its time in the vents.
Is this actually? Do you think this is the same shelving unit?
I believe it is. I believe it is the same shelving unit.
I don't understand why there's all these cameras there. And there's fake plants, cameras.
Well, it's so that when the Dread Enoch inevitably takes it again, we might finally get some images.
Should we have a look at some of the books that are on here? I mean, last time we did talk about The Mindful Leader, which
we did.
If that's a very strong hint that I probably need to read. I bet Jenny from HR put that there. We've got another one, Blue Ocean Shift, Beyond Competing. Proven steps to inspire confidence and seize new growth. It sounds like another little message to me. How I built this guy. The point is, what we don't want to see is these generic nonsense here. We want aviation merchandise.
Exactly.
So if you are watching this and you have some model planes, if you have plane tickets from maybe legendary journeys, maybe a photo of you with Alan Joyce, I don't know. Anything cool.
Maybe Alan Joyce himself. I understand he's not doing anything at the moment. We could have him sort of lean on the shelf.
I thought you were going to make a quip about him being a shorter man and that he could fit into them, but that's probably inappropriate. Yeah,
possibly.
But if you do have any aviation merchandise you would like to send us, it would be very much appreciated. Please email us at media@australianaviation.com.au and we will send you the address, etc. Go on.
Now, I understand we've got some aviation merchandise on the table right here now.
So we do in fact have some merchandise on the table here. We have this book, another one about leadership. So maybe it's a recurring theme. This is a book by Chris Smith called Leadership at 43,000 feet. Should be in meters, really. Real leaders don't need a title. So we can put that we'll put that. I don't know if I can. Does this fix? Right, let's put that there.
There we go. We don't need any books about the ocean, do we?
No, we don't. I've also got here some aviators. We can get rid of some more of this shit.
We're going to have to bleep that, Adam.
There we go. And then also, and this is really good, this is a seat belt bottle opener. It is actually a seat belt, but it's also a bottle opener as well. This is really good merchandise. So I'm not going to throw the camera on the floor because that's probably quite expensive, but maybe we can use this with the aviators, I think.
There we go. It's looking better already.
I think that looks quite good as a start. I think that looks much, much better. Anyway, Jake, have we got any more shout-outs before we end this nonsense and talk about the news?
No, not really, Adam. Just a shout out, as always, to our wonderful listeners who have put up with close to 5 minutes now of us talking about a bookshelf.
Drivel, just absolute
and
drivel.
This one you can't really put on me, Adam.
No, this is a lot of it was on us. Anyway, thankfully, the drill was going to end because we've actually had a week of very big news stories. Starting with the confirmation of the long speculated sort of Qatar Airways has bought 25% of Virgin Australia, which we kind of knew that was coming, but it's come with a twist. Jake, tell us a bit more.
Yeah, so this was confirmed this morning in a very early morning press release from Virgin Australia. Virgin confirmed speculation that Qatar is looking to buy a 25% stake in the airline. We'd been speculating, a month or two back that it was going to be about 20%, so 25% stake in the airline. It has also announced that it's going to be wet leasing some aircraft from Qatar Airways to operate services to Doha. So we don't know what kind of aircraft yet. We know it's going to be a wide body. I mean, obviously, you can't really fly narrow body planes out to Doha from Australia. That would be insane. But they're going to be looking to start these flights from Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth to Doha starting in mid-2025. Now, this will be the first time that Virgin has done these wide-body international flights since it came out of administration. And it's, a real kind of expansion of this partnership, because it's already doing code-share flights with Qatar Airways. And I wondered at first, when I read this, why Virgin was going to be wet leasing planes instead of, expanding its code share. But then I realized, Adam, then it twigged
Then it
for
dawned
me.
on you.
It dawned on me, Adam, that potentially, if I'm reading the rules right, potentially this could allow Qatar to, in a way, circumvent these restrictions that it's under the bilateral air service agreements that are preventing it from operating more flights into Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth. As we remember, last year there was a big to-do about the Transport Minister blocking further flights from Qatar Airways into Australia, blocking Qatar Airways operated flights into the major airports. There was still, they could operate as many flights into minor airports as they liked effectively, but into the major airports it was, very, very limited, like I think 21 flights a week or something like that, maybe a bit more. But now with this Virgin deal, with this wet leasing with Virgin, it'll be Virgin operated flights. Virgin flights sold by Virgin. So, there will be Virgin flights, but it will be Qatar plane, Qatar crew, Qatar everything else under this wet leasing agreement. And if I'm reading this right, in the available capacity for Australian international airlines, so airlines operating from Australia, like Virgin or Qantas, to Doha, there's 28 frequencies available in each direction per week with any aircraft type to or from Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, or Perth to Qatar.
So the extraordinary thing about this then is basically a year ago, Catherine King, the Transport Minister, effectively said that Qatar couldn't have any more flights from Australia into Doha. They said, you've got all the capacity we can give you. If you want to put on more, then you need to use bigger aircraft. They basically said, we can't give you any more services.
Or fly into smaller airports.
Exactly, right? But this is what's happened. And the word effectively here is important because they haven't done anything wrong at all. And I don't even think they've been sly. They've been very clever. But what we're going to have is Virgin Australia flying from Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, presumably to Perth to Doha. So it's them as a domestic airline that's doing this, not an international airline. But extraordinarily, they're going to be using Qatar aircraft and presumably also Qatar crew as well.
As a wet lease, yeah.
Yes. So basically, this is a Qatar service from Australia to Doha, but it's not. And this, like you say, therefore opens up the potential of 28 more flights a week.
If I'm reading this right. Disclaimer, I'm not an aviation law expert.
Now, the one of the sort of twists here is that in order for this to happen, the government have to clear this. So it has to go through what the various competition commissions are. And if it's at the ACCC and what have you, have to certify this. Whether or not this is going to be a problem, we don't know, because clearly a year ago they said you can't have this extra capacity. Now they are saying, now effectively it looks like they're going to be able to sort of find their way through here. So we don't know whether this is going to be cleared or not. Now the interesting thing with this is, let's just say somehow the government stopped them putting on these flights. Would Qatar then be interested in taking this 25% stake in Virgin? Because presumably being able to put on these flights is the big carrot that's made this happen. Yeah,
it's a real as you say, as we've both said, clever move here by Qatar. And we have to remember Qatar and Virgin have been, pretty tight for a while. They've got this code share agreement already going on. Virgin went to bat for Qatar last year to talk about the Virgin went to bat for Qatar last year, saying, if you block this Qatar expansion, it will hurt us as a code-share partner and it will prop up Qantas. Virgin was pretty vocal about, allowing these flights in from Qatar. And, there was a lot of commentary about how the Transport Minister should allow Qatar to operate more services into Australia because it would, drive down prices and offer more competition for Australians looking to fly through the Gulf to Europe. So this is a bit of a boon for Virgin as well, because it's kind of they're getting these wide-body international services back without actually having to take on a lot of the risk themselves. They don't have to buy their own planes. They don't have to, hire international crews, train international pilots. They don't have to, go through hoops to get international wide-body aircraft that are very, hard to get at the moment. It's a way to let them fly wide-body, long-haul international routes without flying them and kind of test if that's a viable market for them again, because they have been doing international, but it's been short-haul with their 737s.
But this is a kind of weird back to the future sort of thing, because initially when Virgin Australia launched, it launches Virgin Blue, and it was a domestic low-cost carrier, and it proved to be quite successful. And then what happened is it kind of evolved into becoming Virgin Australia, which is a full-service carrier aimed at taking on Qantas. And a large plank of doing that was having these big 777s that could fly these longer-haul routes. This is about taking on Qantas. This failed spectacularly, I think it's fair to say, when Virgin Australia ended up going into administration in 2020. I was just trying to Google it, and I'm not sure if it was $7-8 billion. It was an extraordinary amount of money. It wasn't working. Now, when it came out of administration, the new plan was to essentially kind of right-size itself, as the kind of parlance goes, and to have a smaller fleet of 737s and just focus on those domestic routes that work. Now, they are, in a sense, going back to the old strategy. Now, as Jake said there, which is very important, it's a lot less risky because, one, these aren't their aircraft, presumably won't be their crew. And also, they're backed by Qatar money. So, in a sense, they get a free hit at this, which is very, very interesting. But nonetheless, this feels like a major U-turn on what we were even hearing 6 months ago. This is now effectively going back to the old strategy. Whether this is going to work or not, we don't know. How deep a pockets Qatar have to keep this going, we don't know. The next thing I was going to put to you, Jake, as well, we've talked about how this affects Virgin Australia. If you were Qantas, what are you going to be feeling about this? Because suddenly now, Qantas has a monstrous rival. They have got Qatar with a lot of money, very ambitious airline, now owning 25% of Virgin Australia, giving them their big planes. If you are Qantas now, suddenly their rivals got teeth.
Potentially. I mean, this still has to go through the Foreign Investment Review Board. It still has to go through the ACCC. I can imagine that the ACCC might look a bit favourably on it, considering that it would, possibly increase competition. I don't know if Qantas would be freaking out about it necessarily. I mean, they're still, pretty dominant. They still have this code share with Emirates. They're still flying their own aircraft to Europe through Singapore. It's definitely something I expect that Qantas would be watching. I don't know if it's necessarily something that they'd be worried about. Just given that it's kind of a trial run. Essentially, is what I'm reading to this. Jane Herdlichker has said that they're kind of dipping their toes into the water with these wet-leased flights. So it'll be interesting to watch. I don't know if Qantas is going to be tearing their hair out over it just yet.
And finally, the other interesting thing about this is it was actually, I'm just looking at the article now, it was back in February that we first heard that the Virgin CEO, Jane Herdlichker, would step down as the CEO. She's still there.
She is.
She's been there for a long time. I've heard whispers from my snouts on the ground that she's working just as hard as ever. She doesn't appear to be somebody putting her feet up. Now, whether or not this deal had much to do with Jane, we don't know. This could have been kind of above her head with Bain.
Bain Capital,
Capital. But she still would have been involved, I'm sure, in selling the airline. I would say now, if she were to leave very soon, which we presume she would, this is a job very well done. She's got this airline through COVID. She's rebuilt its fleet. She's actually got it making money, which hadn't happened in a decade. And now she leaves it with a big investor on the brink possibly of going back on the ASX, but in a very, very, very strong position. Now, whether she was forced out or whether she's left of her own accord, we don't entirely know. But I would say if you look at her, whatever it's been, 4 years or 3 or 4 years in charge, that's a job very well done. A job very, very well done.
Yeah, I think she can sort of leave with her head held high. You know, we've said it before, and you know I'll say it again. I think Jane Herjavec can leave with her head held high when she does leave, and you know I'm sure there'll be some you know. Congratulations and what possibly, you know, other jobs, you know, lined up waiting for her to walk into if she you know wants to take another tilt at being CEO again. But she's run a tight ship.
Would you, if she took over as next editor of Australian Aviation, would you welcome that move, Jake?
Possibly. I mean, it'd be a significant downward step from CEO of Virgin Australia.
And everybody, welcome back. Now, normally, I don't want to ruin the magic of behind the podcast, but normally when I say on that note, we're going for a break, what actually happens is I pause for a few seconds, have a swig of my tea, and then carry on. But this time we actually did have a break. Jake, tell us what happened in the break.
Yeah, so look, I got in touch with some contacts because I wasn't sure before about this about the bilateral air services agreements. You know, this hypothetical capacity for Virgin to fly into Doha using these wet-leased planes. Hypothetically, and I have sort of had it basically confirmed that my read is correct. Hypothetically speaking, because these bilateral air services agreements between Australia and Qatar are reciprocal, i.e. what they get coming in, we get going out. Hypothetically speaking, yes, Virgin Australia could operate as many as, and we don't know if they will, but they could operate as many as 28 flights per week from Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane or Perth to Doha using these wet-leased Qatar Airways planes. So Virgin could go, you know, daily in theory from Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth into Doha. Because that would be, you know, that would be 28 flights per week. Additionally, I'll just go a bit more into this available capacity. They could fly 7 frequencies per week with any aircraft type between Qatar and Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth and Sydney, provided that those services operate via or beyond to a point in Australia other than Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth and Sydney. So, to translate, if they wanted, they could say go from, you know, Adelaide to Sydney to Doha, for example, or Adelaide to Perth to Doha or something, or Canberra, Sydney, Doha, something like that. They could do that up to 7 times a week. They would also be able to fly as much as they like non-stop from any point in Australia other than Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth and Sydney. So that would be Canberra, Adelaide, you know, Avalon.
No, we're not suggesting that this was all purely done to get more flights into Doha. I do think there is certainly a big element there that they genuinely wanted to invest in a domestic carrier. But nonetheless, this is genius, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty clever.
This is like someone at a house of cards, like found some cunning way around the rules. A lot of people thought those rules were stupid, but this is brilliant. This is very clever.
It's a very smart thing for them to have done, and it's going to be beneficial for both Virgin and Qatar Airways, I think.
Well, Qatar, if you do want to come on the podcast,
yeah, absolutely. And you know, anyone from Virgin wants to come on the podcast talk about this, we'd be more than happy to have you as well. And you know, it's potentially good for customers wanting to go to Europe or anywhere connecting through Doha, which is a pretty extensive hub. I think like 100 and something destinations out of Doha. So, I don't want to praise them too highly on the podcast because, as we all know, when we praise airlines on this podcast, they go under.
Yeah.
But you have to think, good move.
Good move. Right, let's move on and talk about Well, another story that's been one of the dominant stories of the year. Obviously, as we record this, it's been the case for a few weeks now or a couple of months now, Rex is still in administration.
Speaking of praising airlines and having them go under.
Exactly, yes. The curse of Australian aviation. Also, obviously, Rex is still in administration. It has been rumoured that this was due to the failure of its 737 capital city flights. There's also been all sorts of kerfuffle between John Sharp, who, as he left, was the chairman, and Lim Kim Hai, who was the old chairman but the biggest single shareholder, I believe. We actually haven't heard a huge much about this in the last few weeks as to what the future is, if there are going to be any bidders, etc. Now, on Monday night, as we record this, there was this kind of Four Corners special where they took Liam and Noel and did separate interviews with them, I believe, to talk about kind of what's gone wrong at Rex. Jake, tell us a little bit more about the latest, because we've had quite a few stories now.
Yeah, so we heard on Four Corners that, and this was something that we saw in an ABC story, but it was sort of buried halfway down. But Rex had apparently been looking to sell off its domestic jet operations to Virgin as part of like a rescue package after the exit of Lim Kim Hai, and that's according to John Sharp, who was Lim's deputy chairman and sort of took over as chairman after Lim was ousted. So Virgin would have taken over the fleet, the staff, the forward bookings. Sharp said that it would have prevented Rex from going into administration, saved around 600 jobs. He blamed Lim for the deal falling through. He said, quote, "We had got to a point where that was pretty much done and then it got torpedoed." Lim confirmed to the ABC that he had been involved in these discussions. He said he told the heads of Virgin and Bain Capital that he needed to be part of the talks. He said, quote, "I said that I'm involved, then that's fine. I said that if I'm involved, then that's fine. If I'm not involved, then you need to know that you run the risk that the shareholders may not approve it." So as much as they probably don't want it to, the Rex saga rolls on, and this comes as well as there was a source claim to The Australian that there has been no obvious buyers for Rex, purportedly someone close to the administration. This is happening as EY Australia is continuing to look to sell the airline. The Australian reported that the sources said no single buyer has come forward, though they have, sold a few things like a house near Sydney Airport, which they had for some reason, flight simulator, inventory of spare parts. They've sold some of those to get some cash in hand. Interested parties have been looking at Pel Air, which is a charter airline, as well as the Rex Flight Training Academy. The source said, quote, "Rex has always been a bit of a Frankenstein business that was put together, so it was somewhat inevitable the business would be broken up. It's also understandably been a slow process, but I think that things are starting to move finally." They said, "I'm a bit surprised that somebody hasn't stepped forward because the business does make money, and I think the concerns around the fleet are somewhat overblown. These are the Saab 340s that are, some of which are almost as old as I am." He said the source said the Saabs have largely flown short distances over a long period of time. So people like to talk about age in terms of years, but in terms of kilometres flown, it's not that old a fleet. I think people might be waiting to see if the government might provide some kind of guarantees or support for the business to allow them to step in.
So it's essentially, it's positive-ish. They've not actually had a buyer for the bulk of their regional operation.
Yeah.
They're selling off the side bits, which we're always going to do well. Nonetheless, this has dragged on for a long time.
It has.
It has dragged on for a long time. If there's no actual buyer yet, if no one's actually emerged, then probably we're a few months away at best from getting any traction.
Yeah, I don't want to make a direct apples to apples comparison. But it is kind of similar to what we were hearing out of Bonzi. There was speculation. Yes, we've got several interested parties. 6 of them are very interested in picking up the business and the AOC. And then nothing came of it, and Bonza ended up in liquidation. I'm not saying that the same is going to happen to Rex. Obviously, they are in different situations wherein they are flying, they have planes. They are. They are looking. They have something to buy besides the AOC. But it's kind of interesting to see that a similar situation emerging if this source, with what the source says is true.
And I would say, John Sharp, friend of the show, we've had him on the show a couple of times now. Why are you going to four corners? You don't need four corners. There's two corners here. Come back on
There's no corners here, Adam. It's a round table.
All right. It was funny. Basically, John, if you are listening, you want to come on the show, we'd absolutely love to have you to talk about Rex and whatever else you want to talk about. Right, let's move on to the next story. Jake, what are we going to talk about next?
Let's have a bit of a breather and talk about Air New Zealand.
Oh, yes. Let's talk about this. They've come for us, haven't they? We've been personally stung on the wider Australian aviation team. Go on, Jake.
Yeah, so this was something that was brought to our attention last week by some folks we know. The South Korean booking website for Air New Zealand had a bit of a technical problem that was seeing fares posted, economy fares, trans-Tasman for like 6,100 Korean won, which is the equivalent of like less than $7 Australian. And there were business fares selling for around 14 Australian dollars. And we were thinking to ourselves, if this is a sale,
it's good, isn't it?
This is a fantastic deal. So I would like to personally apologize to everyone who might have booked one of these flights, because I reached out to Air New Zealand.
Oh, no, you're a grass, aren't you? You grassed them in.
Yeah, I told the teacher that they'd forgotten to assign us homework.
God.
And I said to I asked Air New Zealand about this, and it was confirmed that it was a glitch, which does make sense because these prices were being advertised as far out of September next year, which, could have really hurt them if this had been allowed to go on. But they suspended the South Korean site, refunded customers who had booked those absurdly cheap fares. We saw an email from one customer where they'd offered reimbursement for reasonable non-refundable expenses, so accommodation transfers, that sort of thing. Apparently, according to Air New Zealand's Chief Customer and Sales Officer, Leanne Geraghty, it was a glitch in the currency conversion extension on the South Korean storefront. Just over 1,800 bookings were made before they suspended the website to avoid any further purchases. She said, as this was an error, we will refund customers who booked tickets at the incorrect prices. We know this will be disappointing, so we're offering them the opportunity to rebook the same flights at the lowest fare class available. So entry-level fares, essentially, if they still wish to travel. We want to apologize for this genuine error in our system. Our teams are working to understand the root cause and ensure this doesn't occur again in the future.
Blah, 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 blah. What rubbish. I'm sorry. So we're going to offer them the opportunity to rebook the same flights at the lowest fare class available. So basically what they said is, you got to steal, and if you want to buy the flights anyway, you can. So they're not actually... I'm sorry, Air New Zealand, that isn't good enough. You could at least give them a voucher, give them $100 off. I don't know what it is, but just going, oh, sorry, we messed up. But if you want to, you can pay a lot more for the same ticket. It's not good enough.
This is kind of a similar situation that Qantas had back in August. You'll remember that they were selling, accidentally sold around 300 first-class seats to America at 15% of the normal price. Now, Qantas and Air New Zealand are not obliged legally to honour those sales. They were clearly in error. But what Qantas did was they basically said, if you book these tickets, we will give you a seat in business class instead if you want one, which is still around 65% off the normal price, which is still a pretty good deal.
So basically, when Qantas were in this situation, they actually did a much better job than Air New Zealand did.
I'm inclined to cut Air New Zealand a little slack because I don't know if anyone, seriously expected they were going to be able to legitimately fly to New Zealand for $7.
Wow, look, I'm saying now, Air New Zealand, this is my view, not good enough. So here's what we're going to do. If you have booked an economy ticket, you get that upgraded to business class, just like Qantas did. If you happen to have bought a business class ticket for absolute peanuts, you can let them have that at the economy rate. That's what Qantas did. And
hang on. Are you saying that if they booked an economy seat for $7, they can have a business class seat?
So basically, you pay for the economy seat in the normal prices.
Yep.
you get a business class seat. If you happen to buy a business class seat, you pay at the normal economy rate. So basically, we're giving them a free upgrade to business. That is the least you can do. Everyone has a good go at Qantas, but you know what? When it come down to it, they were a lot more generous. I see no reason why you cannot match this. We will be keeping on top of this story. We will send you an email and ask, will you match what Qantas did? If you don't, we may have to do a follow-up story on it. I wouldn't want to do that, but it feels like people have been badly let down here. 1,800 people. And breathe. Right, we're going to go.
You're okay, Adam?
I am okay. I'm just, I get angry when customers get treated badly. For me, I'm all about the passengers.
Adam, they bought the flights for $7.
Well, they weren't to know. They just thought it was a gift from God or the universe or something. Okay, welcome back. So, Jake, what are we talking about next?
Well, speaking of Qantas and IT glitches, it came out this week in this statement of agreed facts and admissions. You will recall the ghost flights.
The ghost
Adam.
flights, yes.
When Qantas was caught flying haunted planes, where customers were assailed by spectres. And had their dinners thrown around the cabin by poltergeists, which is obviously an unacceptable way to fly. Sorry. No, sorry. I'm getting in my ear. That's not what a ghost flight is.
We do the nonsense at the start of the show, Jake. You can't. You saw basically what happens. He saw out of the corner of my eye that I was looking at an email, and he pounced. He saw me at weakness, and this has become like poltergeist stuff. I don't know. Go on.
So the ghost flights where Qantas sold thousands of seats on flights that had already cancelled. Now, earlier this year, Qantas came to an agreement with the ACCC, basically admitting that these flights had been sold, and that it was a mistake. They are paying something like $120 million, so like $100 million penalty and $20 million to reimburse customers, something along those lines. It's come out in this statement of agreed facts and admissions that was signed off by the ACCC and Qantas that senior management at Qantas was aware that the customers were booking these services and that passengers weren't immediately notified, but the agreement does concede that no single person knew of these problems that allowed the cancelled flights to be sold. So and it's gone through all of the steps that were taken, when a flight was cancelled. The documents basically said, quote, senior managers responsible for different aspects of Qantas' systems and operations knew that flights the subject of a cancellation decision were not immediately removed from sale, that some consumers could and did make bookings on flights after those flights had been the subject of a cancellation decision, that consumers who had made bookings on flights the subject of a cancellation decision were not notified of that decision immediately, and that the managed booking pages for flights that were the subject of a cancellation decision were not updated to reflect that decision promptly, although no single person knew all these matters. As a result, Qantas was aware of the way in which its system operated in relation to the removal of cancelled flight from sale and the notification of consumers regarding flight cancellations. Now, Qantas has since updated its systems and processes to basically speed up the cancellation process and make sure that customers get notified quickly when their flight is cancelled.
So this is interesting. So we first basically heard about this it was a few months ago when the ACCC put out a press release. But in terms of the actual details, that's something we haven't known now. This was at the end of last week, kind of quietly, I say quietly, but it was slipped out through the federal court. We got hold of this document via our sister brand, or one of the other titles in the company we work for, Lawyers Weekly. So Jerome Dorisami, the editor of Lawyers Weekly, thank you very much. And like I said, so basically what this told us for the first time was there were senior managers, of which we don't know how senior that is, that were aware of this glitch, and obviously didn't raise the alarm. But as Jake said, crucially, no one person was aware of the full extent of this. So people knew different things. That appears to be the crucial reason why the ACCC dropped its claim that Qantas did this deliberately. So because people knew, presumably this is why they've had to pay such a big fine, but at the same time, clearly this didn't go right to the very top. This wasn't a deliberate attempt to mislead people. Nonetheless, it is very interesting. Qantas, I believe, have kind of stabbed by their original sort of statement, which basically says this was the COVID, post-COVID time. This was chaos. You've got to cut us a little bit of slack, which is fair enough. I think this is a case of, I mean, it almost sounds harsh, but this is a case of incompetency rather than a deliberate attempt to.
Well, it's Hanlon's razor, isn't it, Adam?
Go on.
Never attribute to malice that which may be adequately explained by incompetence.
Right, and we're going to move on to a couple other Qantas stories. First one, I'll get in the story that I wrote on Friday, which is basically missed by the entirety of Australian media, and in fact would have been missed by me if I didn't completely fluke upon it, which is the fact that at the close of play, or the close of business, or whatever it is, on Thursday, Qantas shares finally beat their pre-COVID peak. So at the end of trading on Thursday, shares in Qantas were valued at $7.45, beating the $7.35 recorded on the 20th of December 2019. And I said that this is, it's a symbolic moment. But what makes it extraordinary was obviously that COVID caused, as I called it in the kind of journalese, one of the most astonishing free falls in ASX history, which I think is fair enough, because their stock went from being $7, whatever it was, just pre-COVID, all the way down to $2.36. If you want to see something extraordinary, have a look at the ASX and watch that graph, that absolute nosedive. So for me, for somebody that kind of covered the COVID crisis, watched all this happen, this does feel like, I say, a symbolic moment. This is another step closer to COVID finally being over. I'm not declaring the pandemic over from aviation until we go back to 100% domestic or passenger numbers. But this is a very symbolic moment for those people shrewd enough to have invested at Qantas, or brave enough at their lowest point.
Buying the dip?
Is that what they call it?
I think it's called buying the dip, yeah.
Buying the dip. Well, for those that bought the dip have been, they've been absolutely vindicated, because you now would have more than trebled your money. Still a brave move. A lot of people at the time said, whatever happens, the government will bail out Qantas. I'm not so sure. When COVID first happened, we didn't know if it's going to last a year, 18 months, 2 years, 10 years. There was a point during the second wave that we had here in Australia that we wondered if the thing would ever go away. So there was never a guarantee that Qantas was going to bounce back. Nonetheless, those were brave enough to invest have done very, very, very well. And finally, we have another Qantas story, which actually, weirdly for us, kind of came out of nowhere. And this is about Qantas engineers going on strike. Jake, can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, so this... We didn't really hear much about this until late last week, right before it happened. But there's Qantas engineers been going on strike. Sort of started last week, which with these with some engineers at major airports downing tools. This is from these are staff from the Qantas Engineers Alliance. So it's the AMWU, the AWU, and the ETU. They started striking on Thursday. They're looking for a 5% pay rise per year, 15% in the first year, to account for 3.5 years of wage freezes. So they started going on strike on Thursday. On Monday, we then saw more peak hour work stoppages by these the Qantas, the alliance unions, as they're called, the Qantas Engineers Alliance. These were line maintenance engineers who went on strike on Monday morning, and they were joining existing strike action by these engines and components maintenance workers. Now, Qantas has basically come out and said disruptions have been kept to a minimum. There have been contingencies in place to avoid, delays and cancellations to flights. and Qantas says these demands are unsustainable, but it is committed to reaching a deal that improves pay and conditions, including things like higher pay for apprentices, better career progression opportunities.
One of the interesting things about this, and I don't really want to talk about, behind the scenes of journalism here, but generally speaking, if there's going to be a strike, we know about it long before it happens. Now, if you really want to string it out, you can have the union basically having a whinge about pay and conditions. Then they can talk about, thinking about having a vote, that vote being cleared, for it, so it's protected action. Then you have the warning. Then you build up the various different strike dates. You start off by taking a few hours off, then you strike for the whole day, etc., etc. This thing seemingly came out of nowhere. Which is very, very bizarre. In the 4 years I've been doing this, I've never seen a similar situation because we're on top of this. Like, we're the first people unions go to. So it felt very strange that, one, this came out of nowhere. Secondly, these were quite significant strikes. The union were clearly very angry because they talked about the potential of it disrupting the vest football thingy, AFR.
The AFL.
Whatever. It's stupid. So it's just, if the whole thing appears to be this is not the usual union playbook. I don't think, did this actually cause that much disruption in the end? Not that
I saw, Adam. There was some, and by Qantas's admission, there were some delays due to weather. But I was looking at the sort of the disruption index at major airports on Monday morning, just seeing what was going on. It wasn't terribly high. Average delays maybe about 20 minutes, and that sort of could be attributed to in part to weather conditions. So it didn't really seem to affect much, but possibly it will start to have a bigger impact if these strikes continue. So it's something to watch. And it's come. This news about the strikes has come in something of a better news week for Qantas, recently, because they've launched this A380 service to Johannesburg. They've upgauged the 787-9 Dreamliners, and they've been given this capacity that Virgin is vacating to fly into Tokyo Haneda. We talked about the end of Virgin's Cairns to Haneda flights a few months back. Qantas has now been given that capacity, and they're going to be using it to do daily flights from Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane to Haneda, as well as flights from Sydney to Tokyo Narita. So it's been a decent news week for Qantas outside of this, and this strike has sort of basically, as you say, come out of nowhere. Another interesting thing Qantas has done recently actually is this new ad campaign. Have you seen the ad campaign?
Yeah. Oh yeah, so they've got Chris Hemsworth back. It's so Route One, isn't it? It's basically, let's get Chris Hemsworth, let's get Kylie. It's always the same old people. Anyway, I thought it was all right. But yeah,
well, it's the first time that they have done a major North American ad campaign in something like 10 years. And it's shot on an A380, and it's got all these shots of Australian locations. It's kind of the pretty generic sort of Qantas stuff, but as you say, it does have Chris Hemsworth doing the voiceover. So,
are you a fan of Thor? I can see you being a big Marvel fan.
I have enjoyed a bit of Marvel in the past.
Yeah.
I think along with a lot of people, I've kind of fallen off after Avengers Endgame because I don't know. I guess there's a lot of movies and shows to keep up with. As far as the MCU goes nowadays, and it's just hard to keep on top of all of them.
I mean, I'm a Tom Hiddleston guy, so Chris Hemsworth, no, I'm not interested. It was an all right advert, to be fair. It is an all right advert. Right, we've done 46 minutes of this nonsense. We've got time for one more story. Dealer's choice.
One more story.
Just the one more story. You can't do one, and then I go to wrap up the show, and you go, actually, we've got to do more. We do this charade every other week. One more. That's all you got. What are we getting?
I guess just a note of congratulations to Western Sydney Airport, perhaps.
Oh, yeah, no, go on. You can do no congratulations.
Yeah, Western Sydney Airport has nabbed its first cargo airline for its cargo precinct. That is Qantas Freight. So Qantas Freight will be flying out of Western Sydney Airport. They've also got Menzies Aviation, which is the sort of aviation services company, and their kind of air cargo division. They will be operating out of Western Sydney Airport when it opens in 2026. This cargo precinct is supposedly going to be it's supposed to increase freight capacity into Western Sydney or into Sydney in general by 33%, which is pretty significant. And we've had quite a few sort of airport infrastructure stories recently. We haven't reported on this yet, but Brisbane Airport's finishing its runway works. It's in the middle of the major domestic terminal revamp. It's been a solid year for airport infrastructure.
Bloody love a bit of infrastructure. I love it. We've said it before. The only thing better than being at the airport is the journey to the airport, the Christmas Eve to the Christmas Day. Right, before we
unless you're in Melbourne, in which case the journey to the airport is either
miserable,
Sky Bus or cab out from the city centre.
Give us an update on your musical. Go on. What's going on?
Strictly Ballroom.
Yeah.
Baz Luhrmann Strictly Ballroom will be at Model Farms High School from the 8th to the 16th of November in Sydney, where in full swing, sort of preparing for rehearsals now. We're getting everything blocked and laid out. Should be a good show.
How much? Because as your agent, what cut do I get of this? It's like 30%.
It's
not hyping you up.
I'm not
stuff.
being paid.
Okay.
It's
This is
theatre.
why you need an agent. They are honestly, mate. I've told you about this. We need paid gigs, right? I got bills to pay, right? So we need to get you on some TV commercials, actual radio. Like we need to get you some paid gigs, sponsorship deals as well. Maybe airlines can kind of rent you out.
I feel like that would be bad for my journalistic integrity.
Oh, we don't care about that. Don't worry about that. We've got bills to pay. Right. Have you got anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
2 and 2.
Oh, God.
It adds up to 4.
Oh,
I've heard.
God. Right. Now, anyway, what I will say, so we're going to go back to the shelving unit. We need to. I want to be able to physically throw that camera onto the floor in the next episode. We need you to send us stuff.
Please do not physically throw that camera onto the floor.
Why? It's old,
Jordan
isn't it? If it was any good, they would be using it. Just throw that. I'm going to trash it. I'm going to slowly trash this from top to bottom until we've got stuff to put up there. So we're looking for model aircraft, ideally, plane tickets, pictures, anything. Or if you've got, like, I don't know, a wheel going, a landing gear, a bit of aircraft would be great. We've got a seatbelt there. Or perhaps anything like uniforms as well. Like, we can't put the whole uniform up, but if you've got a jacket, you've got a cap, anything you've got, any trinkets, please email us. We will read out the story. We're very grateful, but we can't have this rubbish. I mean, it's nonsense, isn't it? We got to get. I mean, that speaker, right? If someone can send me something good, I'll just toss that speaker.
Well, they can't see the speaker, Adam.
Oh, they can't see the speaker. Well, there's basically a speaker down there. It's enormous. And actually quite a good speaker. I might take that back.
It'd be nice to have a sort of a trial run of putting more aviation stuff on the shelves, or if you will, a pilot program.
Oh, I like that. That is excellent. On that note, don't say anything else because you've done a good job there. On that perfect note, we will wrap up and we will be back on the show at the same time next week. But for now, from us, goodbye.
Goodbye.